Well, here we are, everyone. Welcome to the Markcast Live. Little Horse today was at the Kraken 7-2 win over the Dallas Stars last night, Game 3 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, round 2. Very exciting times. I think this is going to be the true test of the XFL or of the USFL's drawing power. I don't care. TV ratings, attendance. Let's see what the Markcast does on Monday morning. Just talking USFL. I think that will be the true test. We have Pat Rifino here, and we have Evan Willsmore. I thought was moving this week. Evan moving back home for the summer said, no, I want to come on and talk USFL. So we have Evan as well. Always happy to have him. Pat, how are you doing? And then we can talk to Evan as well.
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me, especially with Andy doing his Pitbull tour right now.
Yeah, Andy, Mr. Worldwide. Evan, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, doing good, man. Bit tired, but I'm excited to talk football just like we did last week. And, there's a lot to go over between the 4 games we had, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, so just a reminder here, programming note, no normal Friday show this week. We will be live on Saturday from the Riverwalk in San Antonio. Andy will be flying in from Japan. We have Anthony Miller joining. I think Jason with the X-Fan show will be there. They're doing the big shindig Friday night. I do not, no one corresponded with me about hey, I'm flying in about 7 o'clock San Antonio time. So I will be partying, I think, after the show, but then we will do our big show on Saturday, 2 to 4 local. I'm calling the Alamo today. I have about 10 names on our list. If you're going to be in San Antonio, if you want to be a part of the Alamo tour, we're doing that 10 a.m. Central, and then the big show 2 to 4 before the kickoff game. But just USFL talk today. We will try to do our best. Evan or Pat, any thoughts on the XFL weekend before we get to just USFL today?
I mean, not so much with the game, because I think, in my opinion, I think this championship game could be one of the best games we've ever seen or one of the worst games we've ever seen. I have no idea. And I think if anyone was to tell you that they knew that this was going to be a good game, they'd be lying to you, because the Renegades. But pretty excited to see the signings or the camp invites that will lead the signings in the future.
Yeah, a lot of traction there. Evan, I know you've been tracking that as well. Are you surprised so many camp invites coming out from the XFL season before we get to USFL?
Yes and no. I mean, a camp invite, isn't the same as a contract, right? Really everything on or after May 15th is what I'm looking forward to. It is a bit more than I expected. But I will say, everyone's deserving of that opportunity. And I've liked, all the players that have gotten those camp invites so far. There's a couple that I'm surprised, haven't, but I'm assuming maybe, something is in the works, or they're just going to wait until May 15th at this point, because we're only a week away from that. So
I am tremendously excited, as Pat and I know a lot of USFL, brass really grasp onto the USFL, the NFL signing. So I will be very curious to see how the XFL stacks up with that. This was an exciting weekend. I watched 2 of the games. Obviously, I did not watch a lot of the Stallions game last night. I did have it on at the bar. I did my part at the Kraken bar heading to the game, but I obviously watched the Breakers, and then we watched the Gamblers as well. Pat, overall thoughts on the USFL weekend here? Week 4, we finally no overlap. We don't got to worry about the darn XFL for a week.
So I had the luxury of watching all the games. I'd say about 80% of all the games. The quarterback play is so weird to me right now, because I do my weekly quarterback rankings, right? And I'm sticking with MBT at number 1, but he had a good game, but he didn't statistically light it up as far as, 4 touchdowns like he always does and everything like that. But overall, we're starting to, and I was looking through because I track receiving stats as well. This has been my next phase of my tracking, and I'm going through all the rosters, and I'm pretty impressed by a lot of the skill position players the USFL has found / has been building up. Because even I'm looking at the Maulers roster, and I'm like, Bailey Gaither, definitely not a scrub, NFL experience, as a fringe practice squad guy, who kind of that week 17 when all your receivers are hurt has an 80-yard game. And you're like, oh, this guy. And Isaiah Henney has kind of taken the role as this punt return, the stud punt returner this year. And the Generals, DeAndre Johnson isn't, the sexiest quarterback in the league, but when he a couple of his incompletions were some of the best passes I've seen him throw in a while. And he's got a good, stable of receivers right now in Alonzo Moore, Cam Eccles, Looper. Those tight ends, Brandon Bowman and Woody Braden aren't terrible tight ends at all, not the most athletic. So it's good to see these skill position players. It kind of seems like they're a little bit ahead than the defense. And then Troy Williams, he looks better and better each week, along with Kenji Bahar. And that's the thing is I've talked about them a lot in my rankings is they could be the biggest risers because they just need experience, And I don't know if their NFL, like Williams' NFL game would translate, but he's putting together good film and he's, having, he's entertaining and he looks better than James Morgan out there. And that's, if we're talking about the entertainment product, not the NFL translation, he's keeping me engaged when the Maulers have the football.
It's funny. I just saw just comments, and we were sharing a few of them. I think Sam in the chat, where I'm so glad had USFL this weekend. Can't handle the gimmicky XFL, and XFL has the same rule book. We've copied. It's weird to me how this narrative just seems to be right now. Like, okay, well now like I can enjoy, or this is different kind of football. It feels very similar to me. USFL feels like the XFL was in week 4, and we are trying to get there. Some of these teams, Evan, do you feel like teams are further ahead than they should be or less ahead than they should be here week 4 now of USFL?
I liked what I saw this weekend. It's hard to say. Like Pat said, I do like the talent level. Personally, I think that there is a bit more talent this year than there was last year. And I kind of like, it's been interesting to see the development of certain players that I didn't expect, to do as well. Take Troy Williams, for example, was a really good one. But I think, they're doing all right. There's, I think they said it on the USFL broadcast yesterday on one of the games. I forget which one, but they were kind of saying, week 4, week 5 is the point of the season where you sort of see the cream of the crop, I guess is the term you like to use, where the good teams rise and then the bad teams kind of fall, and you start to get a bit of separation in terms of, who might be in playoff contention and who might not be. So right now you've got, New Orleans and New Jersey, and then let's see, who else? This Birmingham, I guess, too. Those teams are all kind of on the rise. And then you've got, a couple others that are still like, we'll get to Memphis. I like their performance, but they're still down there. Michigan's got a couple things to figure out. I know Pat will talk about that. And then, Houston's kind of a wild card. They came out and, scored like 41 points or something against Philly, which was a big deal. And then, the Stars are the other team that's just kind of like, well, they definitely got some stuff to work out, bit of regression there.
Yeah, so I made we can talk here. So I made the wager. I had was turning on the game first thing on Saturday morning. I said, "Oh, it's Anthony Miller's Gamblers against my Stars. We'll have a big bet." Anthony had his Kenji Bahar jersey on. I said, "Whoever loses this game is going to have to chug a Shinerbach beer in San Antonio for our live show, because either way, we're going to win." Stars look horrendous. Look like you could not protect, Case Cook is here with a paper bag. Why have these Stars regressed so much here, Pat?
Well, they lost 2 key players, and Sam and I talked about this offline. Alex Akingbulo went to the Washington Commanders. He was one of their tackles, in addition to Gunnar Vogel, who's now in the XFL. So those are 2 high-quality guys. Vogel's had some NFL looks. Akingbulo was active towards the end of the season. So you have 2 of these guys who are lost. And it seems like the game planning, in my opinion, is a little bit more linear. I think when I watch Case Cookus play, he's getting a little bit of happy feet because of the offensive line having more holes in it than Swiss cheese. And it's really disappointing because we all thought that Case Cookus would take this next step. And we want to poo-poo him a little bit because, his numbers aren't there. But when you watch the games, he's not having any time to actually run around and, sit in the pocket and actually make his reads and whatnot. And it's a little disappointing. The rushing attack, I think they had like 20, not 20. I want to say it was like 40 yards. I know you have it on the screen right now, but Cookus has, been a part of their rushing attack. Yeah, 44 yards. And they're running the ball 11 times. You have 2 quality NFL level running backs back there with Dexter Williams and Matt Colburn. And obviously they might not be, elite running backs in the NFL, but they're serviceable to, a back-end roster / they should be pretty good in the USFL. And it just seems like they've become very one-dimensional with Bart. the passing attack, because they do have a stable of weapons with Corey Coleman, Chris Rowland, and Devin Gray back there. But I'm just kind of, you can't really, it all starts in the trenches, and right now they're getting dominated up there, and it's disappointing because they did lose 2 quality offensive linemen last year, and the center, even the center, I think his name is Perez. It seems like he's slow off the snap a little bit, so I'd like to do more background into him on my end for future shows and whatnot to see if that's his natural position, because it just seems like he's not really popping up and engaging and whatnot. And there were a couple plays where they didn't identify the linebackers, it looked like, and the guard is just going straight to the nose, or that one technique, and the linebacker's just coming in, and then you're asking, Dexter Williams, who's not a great pass protector, to take on a linebacker who's running in with a full head of steam. So it's disappointing because we know who Case Cookus is. He has that fringe level NFL potential, and we're not seeing him take that next step to show like, hey, I could be I can go into an NFL game and actually make a play or two.
It feels very much like, and I was just at the Kraken game last night, 0-0 through the first period, right? Goose eggs. And then we erupt, we go 5-1 in the second period. And it really felt like we felt like this game. Like I'm watching this game. Philly felt in it for, we have the drive, score at 7-7. And then it felt like once Houston started going, they never looked back. It never felt close at all. Harrison has a question here in the chat. One of the things we're seeing midway through is that a lot of the new coaches are improvements over the guys they replaced. That may be, but it feels like Bart has like stagnated now and kind of everyone else is running circles around him. Evan, are you just surprised? Is it like Bart has been found out? I think Mike was talking about that in the group chat as well. Like they're just not trying to do anything at all to deviate from the plan.
Yeah, well, I mean, Pat talked about sort of the one-dimensional factor in a way. And, you could definitely say that Philadelphia is getting exposed to an extent. To me, I think the biggest problem is the run game. You can't win a game really in any pro league if you have 44 yards rushing. And that's just from the Stars' perspective. They have a lot of good talent. Like Corey Coleman, I remember writing about, almost 2 years ago saying, hey, look down the line, like this could be a guy that comes to the USFL. And here he is on what is supposed to be a premier team with one of the premier quarterbacks in Case Cookus. And so far, they've only won 1 game in week 1, and they barely squeezed by Memphis, who just won their first game against Michigan this weekend. So I don't really know what to think of them. It's a real shame. I kind of thought they'd be quick risers because if you look at, the rest of the league, I just feel like last year they made the championship game, and that was really close with Birmingham. And I like Bart a lot. I think he's a great coach. I think he's great for these leagues. Like he did the spring league, obviously, and that's where, he did some great things with Brian Scott, who was with the Stars last year, obviously got hurt, and then the whole Case Cookus era started. But, definitely been a surprise. I can't say the Stars won't turn it around, but they've definitely been the most shocking team so far, and I don't mean that in a good way.
Yeah, I feel like Case is going to get hurt out there again. I mean, it's just really crazy to me. Pat, here's my thing, and this might be the homer in me, but, are the worst teams worse in the XFL or the USFL? Like, because it feels like some of these teams in the USFL, like it just feels like more of a divide. I know last year it felt like that in the USFL, that come like week 6, we kind of knew it didn't matter. XFL, we talked for ad nauseum for weeks, like the games near the end, mattering more because of more parity. What do you make of that? Do you think that there's worse teams in the XFL or the USFL?
Well, when I think of the bad teams of the XFL, I think of the Brahmas and I think of the Guardians. And the Guardians were fun to watch because they were extremely competitive. And even though the Brahmas had some bad games, their defense was extremely, extremely competitive, and they were making plays. So they might be down 15 points, but then you might see Delonte Scott or Troy Williams make a play, and then their offense stalls. So it's kind of nice to watch. If you look at the Stars defense, because right now it appears to me that the Stars are the least competitive team to watch, and maybe that's incorrect, but regardless, that's how I feel. Teams are kind of shining away from even throwing the ball around, Channing Stribling, and I'd actually have to rewatch the all 22 of the film, but it kind of looks like and I've talked with a couple of Michigan, like U of M guys, because that's where Stribling went. Strib's got some weaknesses. Sometimes he's a little too aggressive. He gets beat a decent amount. He's a very good zone cover corner. But the thing is like he was, able to make those reads and kind of, get some cheap interceptions and whatnot. He's a big guy too, so he's physical. But it seems like we're not even seeing that, and they're kind of just shying away from him. And because their defensive, like their front seven, isn't that dynamic, you're seeing a lot of Mark Thompson averaging 10 yards a carry. And Evan, to go back on your rushing totals, when I do rushing statistics and like evaluate those, unless it's a design quarterback run, I don't really include that. So Case Cook has had 2 carries for 16 yards. You take away that because they're off script plays. Now we're looking at 9 carries for 28 yards. You're not going to win football games averaging, a tick over 3 yards a carry. This isn't the Vince Lombardi age anymore.
Evan, thoughts on, Mark Thompson looked great for the Gamblers. I thought he was tremendous. A lot of good positions over there. Any more thoughts on the Gamblers before I move on to some of the other matchups?
Yeah, I mean, the Gamblers were fantastic. On the other end, I kind of expected that to be a pretty close game where maybe Philly would have the advantage. But, the Houston's really got it together. Seems like they're finally, getting in their groove after last year where they had a really good defense, but the offense would sputter and they, blew a lot of late games. And it was just kind of a rough year all around. I'm sure if Anthony were here, he could tell you all about that. But yeah, no, I mean, you look at, Kenji Behar, he's come a long way, and I've been very surprised in his development too. Again, another one of these guys that I didn't really view too highly, but he had a near perfect game yesterday. I mean, he had quarterback rating, it says there, of 139. And then, yeah, Mark Thompson, was fantastic. He's really been helpful for them. And yeah, I mean, I just, the Gamblers look great. If they keep that up, I don't think they'll have a problem against, even some of the top talent in the USFL, and some of the better teams take like a Birmingham or a New Orleans. I know they had that close game with New Orleans that they weren't able to win because of the turnovers, but that's the main thing. Without Behar throwing interceptions this time, his performance with 230 yards and 2 touchdowns actually looked a lot better. And the team was able to, I mean, that game, was over before it even really began in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, really the only life that Philadelphia ever had was it was like the missed handoff, and they fumbled, and Philadelphia was able to get the ball back, like the 35 or something. I mean, it just didn't seem like Philadelphia could do anything. Really disappointing. I mean, obviously that's the team that like I root for, but it just you just want teams to be competitive, and it just didn't feel like for the sparse fans that were at Michigan, it didn't seem like they had that good of a showing. Pat, any other thoughts? We can move on.
Yeah, I think the most impressive thing about Houston is, and we talked about it in the pregame show or preseason show, was they lost Micah Abernathy. At the time, they lost Isaiah Zuber, who's playing defensive back for them right now, by the way. He was a wide receiver last year. Joey Ivy, Ahmad Gooden, Chris Odom, Donald Payne. Like, they lost, I think Ike Brown was on that team as well, who's with the Raiders. And their defense is, I don't know if they're better statistically, but you're judged by your win-loss record, and they're at 2 wins. They had 3 last year, so I think that says a lot to Curtis Johnson. It's also a big deal to me that I think we all can agree that Case Cook is not healthy. He was definitely favoring his right hand / arm yesterday, and I'm very curious to see what happens moving forward. They put in Kevin Thompson for that 4th and 12 onside kick play. So it was good to see, and he completed his pass for 11 yards. It was obviously short, but I think it was good to see their both backups play yesterday. Bahar was out. They said he could play. They just took him out for precautionary reasons. But I think it was good to see Terry Wilson and Kevin Thompson play a little bit, just, get that first actual real game snap. So overall, I mean, the Gamblers are a team to watch. They were competitive last year. It seems like they're kind of piecing it together a little bit more. And Bahar this is his 7th pro start, so he should only get better.
Yeah, Harrison, you got to remember USFL early season. It's week 4. It's week 4. I mean, I don't know. Was Arlington as unwatchable as the Stars were week 4?
I mean, we're going off recency bias, so obviously we'll say no, but we're also USFL haters, so we have to say no, right? But I mean, Arlington had a lot more fluidity because of Drew Plitt and then Kyle Sloter, and then Sloter did give them that spark, right? 9 points, 10 points, 11 points. So
that spark, the elusive spark.
Yeah, I think he went 2-1 as a starter. So I mean, I don't know. The thing is I loved watching that Arlington defense. Like that was when Darnell Sankey came from the CFL to the Renegades, and he was immediate impact and whatnot. And they had some studs. I think he was a gambler, Tomasi Loali, was playing pretty well. So I just felt like their defense was way more watchable. Like you kind of tune out when the Renegades offense was on the TV, but that defense was fun to watch.
We had Lewis here. Started about 15 minutes late behind. Catch up there, Lewis. Catch up there. This was the game. Next game on here. This was one that prompted my release the attendance reports meme that I posted online. We had the Memphis Showboats here, Michigan Panthers, 29-10. Michigan Panthers seeming to be the Edmonton Elks of the CFL. Cannot win at home, cannot perform well at home. Evan, any thoughts from you? And then we'll go to Pat, because obviously this is a team that's near and dear to him. But the continuing sparse attendance at Detroit Field. Yeah. Ford Field in Detroit, whatever.
Right.
What I mean?
Yeah. I mean, look, the marketing thing is not something I'll go into, deeply here, because the USFL, again, is not in all their home markets, and it is a bit of a small turnout. But again, for me, it's hard to track, where these teams are playing on a week-to-week basis between the 4 hubs, and considering the Canton hub doesn't technically have an Ohio team. I think it's Pittsburg and New Jersey are the home teams there, right? If I'm not mistaken. Anyway, yes. I don't know. It's kind of it's kind of hard to track where the games are, and I think it's probably again, the team is already in year 2, but because they weren't, in Detroit last year, you don't have that, continuity. So I don't know. We'll see how it is, maybe next year once the word has gotten out that hey, there's this pro team playing at Ford Field. But right now, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't surprise me that the attendance is somewhat low. Again, we don't even know what the number is, unfortunately, so I can't sit here and go off or base anything around a certain number, which is difficult. But again, just kind of eyeing it from the TV. I mean, I would like to see a bit more people there, but I don't know. It wasn't terrible. I'll give them that. It's a step up again from what they had last year with only the Birmingham hub. So that's the way I look at it. If you want to have a positive takeaway, is hey, we're still building, right? Again, this that's where the USFL doesn't have the advantage over the XFL. Is the XFL was already in their home markets year 1, and they brought back a lot of the franchises from 3 years ago. So you sort of have that fan base establishment. Again, I've talked about this before, so I won't talk about it for too long. But in the USFL, they're still working that out. They went from 1 hub to 4 hubs, and then hopefully next year you have all 8 teams. And who knows next year if they're going to change some of the cities around, if who knows if Pittsburgh lasts, or we'll have to see. There's, in my opinion, a couple things that aren't necessarily permanent. Just going into year 2, we already had the Tampa Bay Bandits become the Memphis Showboats, who we're about to talk about here in a minute. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. It's not bad, but when you haven't necessarily marketed yourself, and when you're, I guess, still, again, trying to figure out all these things, and people still don't know a lot about what's going on, you can't expect, to fill up an entire, well, I mean, they weren't going to fill up Ford Field, obviously, but even just filling up a couple sections.
I will say, you can talk about attendance being important, not being important, YouTube subscribers being important, not being important. I wouldn't run the banner on the thing. I wouldn't talk about liking and subscribing if subscribers weren't important. Don't think the USFL will be running ads ad nauseum. Come to the games. It's great for kids. They're really cheap. Face painting. We've got the mascot. I think attendance is important. I think they can say whatever they want. It's a TV product. We don't care about that. You wouldn't be running ads all the time on Fox trying to get people out to the games if it wasn't. Pat, football time, thoughts here. Showboats. Todd Haley didn't kill anyone on the sidelines this time. That was exciting. Finally getting their first win over the Panthers. Like I said, week at home. What did you make of this matchup?
Well, first off, I don't know if you knew this, but Did you know Brady White went to Memphis?
I might have heard about that.
So we talked about it a little bit last week, but praise be that Cole Kelly has gotten full reign of this offense. I didn't think he'd be, air quote, this good, but I was pretty vocal about him being, this big 6'7" guy. It's hard to sack him. Breland Speaks is a massive human being, and he had trouble getting Kelly down. It looked like to me, because of Kelly's size, he avoided 2 or 3 sacks when I was watching the game. So that's your guy, man. Ride or die with him. Like, I'm a little bit of a shill for Ryan Willis, and I've been on record talking about that a decent amount. But it's good. There's been 2 good weeks from Cole Kelly. The offense is moving. He's athletic as the Dickens. It's been great to see. It kind of seemed like Michigan, didn't play their best game. I think if you go on record about it, I think Michigan is better than the Showboats, but it's any given Sunday and whatnot. I'd like to see Carson Strong get the nod. Josh Love, his arm to the outside just doesn't look strong enough, and it seems like he really only has a lot of success when they're throwing to the seams, but now it seems like it's been taken away. They went real run heavy this week. The Panthers did, because the Showboats have one of the worst run defenses in the USFL, and I think that the Panthers still broke over 100 yards, but it did seem like Reggie Corbin was making a lot of plays in the backfield. So, he did his Garrett Groshek thing where he makes 1 or 2 guys miss in the backfield and then gets a 6-yard gain. Obviously, usually Groshek only gets a 3-yard gain from it. But, man, we saw some good stuff from Carson Strong. He was moving the ball down the field. And then when he threw that one ball up, I think it was right before half, he threw it short, where on that play you want to throw it more to the pylon. So even if the defender does make a play on the ball, he's not going to be able to get his 2 feet in bounds and whatnot. Cool thing I saw about Carson Strong is that he was moving around in the pocket a little bit more. So that's really good for me as far as watching his knee look like he's a little bit more mobile. Strong did run a 4.8 during his pro day, so he's a lot faster than we probably think. I know a lot of people are shilling for Eric Barrier because of Troy Williams' success. Barrier only ran a 4.7, and I talked to another guy about this, Panthers shadow, and he was like, "Well, it's not straight line speed," and yeah, he's right, but that's Troy Williams runs a 4.55, probably a 4, a little bit quicker. So it kind of gets to me I don't think Eric Barrier is the answer right now. If they're 2-6, yeah, throw Barrier in there the last couple games, whatever. But this team is still competitive, and they have a lot of good pieces on defense to where they can go on the run. Biden, if you're going off numbers and statistics and analytics, as long as they don't play in Michigan, they're good allegedly. So, but we'll see what's going on. I think they have the Maulers this week, so that could be a get right game and whatnot. But we'll see what the injury report leads as well, because I think Noah Dawkins, their linebacker, is out for a little bit, so we could see a little bit more Terry Myrick, who's a lot more athletic, and kind of put that spy on Williams so he doesn't get as elusive and as many of these off script runs. So I'm happy for the Showboats. It's more about the guys. Once again, they have a good receiving core. Both these teams do, so it's good. It's good to see Cole Kelly have some success, because he definitely has that Taysom Hill vibe for me, to where he could go translate to an NFL camp, and all he needs is the reps.
I think the Panthers need to start winning at home. It's challenging. I think Detroit is a way different market than the other 3 hubs for the USFL, right? We're Birmingham, and it's I know they love football, but it's a little bit more shucks for Birmingham. I've had Roy on and the guys from Birmingham, but it's just not, it's not a major whatever, right? You're in Detroit. You've got the Tony Scotts of the world right out there. You've got Bill Shea that's been on my show, coming out. You're looking at the games. You're comparing them to the Lions. You're comparing them to, what was there in the 80s. You're comparing all these things. I just think it's a tougher market there. Canton's way different. Memphis is way different. it's the biggest market of the four. I think you got the hardest you got to impress the most people there. Evan, does that make sense? Kind of what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely. I mean, yeah, if you look at the four hubs right now, it's Birmingham, Memphis, Canton, and Detroit. Like you said, Detroit is by far the biggest hub there. And, it's a lot. Let's just say this, like a Showboats game, at that Memphis stadium, even if they don't get a lot of people in there, probably looks a lot better than if they don't get a lot of people in the Ford Field, because Ford Field's an NFL stadium. And then the stadium they're using in Memphis is for the University of Memphis, where Brady White played, if you didn't know. We like to joke about that. But I'll just talk about the game quickly for a minute. So like Pat said, Cole Kelly, I went on the show last week and I said I think Cole Kelly should start for the rest of the season, and that was only after one game. And he proved me right again. It wasn't anything, didn't blow your socks off or anything like that in terms of the way he played, but he did a good job. And he kind of got things done, got things moving. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. And he's just got that big frame, right? That's what makes him different. That's why I think NFL scouts really liked him, even though he came from a smaller school at Southeastern Louisiana. But yeah, I mean, I think, at this point, just given how things started, like, you're in week 4 and you finally found some consistency. Like, I think Cole Kelly's the guy personally, and maybe I've got a bit of bias, but again, he looked pretty good. Just going down the list here. Talk about the Panthers for a minute. Like Pat said too, with Carson Strong, it was good to see him. And he didn't throw a touchdown this game, but he was doing some stuff. And yeah, again, with the mobility, that's the major concern with him. One wrong step, one wrong twist, and that could be the end of his season with, given how fragile that knee is and how concerning it was during the NFL draft process. That was the thing that turned a lot of teams away. That was pretty much the difference between him being a 3rd-round pick and him being undrafted, was that knee. That's all it really was, at least to a lot of people and a lot of teams. But to see him now kind of getting in his groove, yeah, I think he deserves a start, like, a full kind of game over Josh Love. And that's not to discredit Josh Love. I don't forget what he did in week 1. That was great. But, Josh Love, I think maybe has kind of hit his ceiling in a way. And I don't know if Carson Strong's hit that yet. But then the rushing attack for the Panthers I really liked between Stevie Scott and Reggie Corbin. I thought they did some nice stuff. Corbin didn't necessarily average a ton of yards this game, but that's okay. They were kind of just, chugging along and, getting what they needed when the pass game wasn't there. And then Joe Walker of the Panthers in their receiving corps is someone I've really liked to watch this season. I think he's come a long way, and he had another great game. Panthers play yesterday. I'm already forgetting. This weekend.
Prime
Saturday.
Time.
It was Saturday. Right. It was Saturday night, I think. Yeah, now I remember. So I like Joe Walker. He had 7 catches, 76 yards, and a touchdown. He kind of seems to be the number 1 option on that team from the looks of it. And then, I don't know, hoping to get a couple big games from Ish Hyman this year too, because I like him a lot. Would enjoy seeing that down the line. I think that's about it. I was definitely surprised that Memphis won the game by 19 points, but I knew they had the chance to win with Kelly at quarterback. And I'm not saying that was the difference maker in this game because Kelly only threw for like 150 yards. But you kind of looked at the Panthers and like, as good as the Panthers are and as much talent they have, like they're still kind of ironing these things out. And it is kind of weird. They've got the, can't win at home bug right now. So if they can get over that, maybe things will start looking better for them. But we'll see. There's a lot of, again, week 4, like I said earlier, is kind of where you start to see teams separate, the good teams kind of, getting above the bad teams, getting ahead, getting ready for, obviously 6 weeks out from the playoffs still, but, getting into position for that. And the Panthers, I don't really know yet. Like, they're kind of that one team where it's like, okay, I can say, the stars aren't great, unless they change something soon, things aren't going to be good for them. Pittsburgh, I didn't talk about earlier, but they, they've got some things to work out. I like what they have. Like, they look better. They're still 1-3. Memphis, still a lot of work to do. But then Panthers at 2-2, they're kind of just like right in the middle. It's like, I don't know. There's a couple different directions where this could go depending on who steps up for them.
Interesting here. Just a couple comments talking about Lewis. I think he's still catching up on the show, watching this. We're like watching Lewis watch through the show in real time here in delay. We had a question here, and this is the only game we have the prelim for. John wants to know the prelim. NBC always does well coming, and especially coming off the Derby. 1.5, I believe, was the first hour, dropped to 860,000. So it'll probably average around. I think absolutely above 1 million, probably 1.2 in that range for the NBC, which for whatever reason has always done more than Fox, even though obviously Fox with the USL. Pat, any thoughts on that prelim rating? And then we'll get to New Orleans.
I mean, yeah, I mean, they got to be happy with that. It's a week 4 game. And granted, there was the benefit of without XFL and the Kentucky Derby lead-in. But just like playing a football schedule, you play who's on the schedule type thing. So, we can talk. It's no different than talking about a team who hasn't air quote played anyone and is 7-0. But that was the card that was dealt this weekend, and the USFL did a good job. And people who want to poo-poo the ratings could be like, well, it's only because of the Derby and no XFL. That's not the USFL's fault. If anything, they took advantage of it. I would rather have that conversation than if they were at 600,000. Then and it's like you can't win with people. It's not a big deal.
This is the game interesting. So New Orleans, we have the Breakers at the Generals here in Canton. This was my 2 cents. Just real quick, read Soapbox before. World lost their minds back in, I think it was week 5, XFL. We have the John McEnroe. We have the pickleball game on ESPN2, the pickleball tournament, which, spoiler alert, drew more viewers than the XFL did that day. And the XFL had to push the start of the, or ESPN had to push the start of the XFL game to ESPN Plus or whatever. People lost their minds. Oh my God, this shows absolutely how ESPN views the XFL. Yesterday, I turned on the game at noon here. I'm watching Orioles Braves going into extra innings. Nobody said a damn word. Oh, see, because it's baseball. That's different, obviously. No, it's the same difference. It's a live sporting event. We're pushing this off. It says nothing that NBC or whoever cares about anything more than anything else. Pat or Evan, any thoughts on that? Because I was incensed that nobody thought, and they're like, oh, it's a totally different situation.
I'm biased to baseball. I'll be 100. I care way more about baseball than I do pickleball. And I think, on taking emotion out of it, Reed, you are absolutely correct. But, I didn't grow up throwing the pickleball around, My fondest memories with my father are throwing the baseball around, you know what I mean? I don't care about pickleball, and I'm not even a Braves fan. I'm a Mets fan, despite with this Cardinal hat on. But I mean, I don't know. It doesn't bother me either one doesn't bother me because here's the thing: pickleball and the whole pickleball league has been around for a while. Baseball's been around for 900.5 years. Spring football is not a priority to these networks as much as we want them to be, in my opinion. So that's my take on it. I don't really care either way, because here's the thing: I'm gonna win and watch the games. I'm curious to see how the ratings feel about that, and the casual viewer who's like, "Oh, I wanted to watch USFL or XFL, but I'm watching pickleball. I'm gonna go get a sandwich," and then you talk to the guy at the deli for a little bit, and then you don't watch the game.
The whole world is trend at that point.
Yeah, but I think it's gonna hit the ratings a little bit personally. But I need to go back to the XFL ratings as well on that.
I just thought it was funny. I just thought oh, well, this is fine because it's baseball and it's not behind because it's
football. It's Twitter too. So who's more vocal about things on Twitter than when we go down the fan bases.
Evan, any thoughts on that before we talk football? I know you really don't want to get into these shenanigans too much. I mean, look, I'll just say this. You're definitely right, Reed. I'll say this much. Pickleball makes for a better story. Okay, baseball doesn't seem as bad because a lot of Americans are watching baseball, and that's going to take priority over spring football. That's just known. Again, like Pat said, maybe we want them to just cut to the USFL game, but the rest of America doesn't want that. The rest of America wants to see the Braves beat the Orioles in extra innings. So I was there because I remember that whole pickleball thing was week 7. It was St. Louis at Houston. I was there. We were sitting in the press box and we're like, oh, time for the game. What's going on? Like the players aren't coming out. We haven't kicked off yet. And then, there's some chatter going around the press box and they're like, oh yeah, John McEnroe pickleball, we had it up on ESPN and we were looking at that and we were just like, yeah, like I guess this is what's causing the delay. So I don't know. I was there for that. It was fun to experience. But I don't know. I didn't think the one yesterday was terrible. It ended pretty quickly. That's the difference. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know like how many minutes each delay was, but like the pickleball one was pretty significant. That one was like, a good 10 minutes, after the kickoff time. But anyway, yeah, as you said, Reed, I don't really get involved on that side of it. So I'll leave it to you to deal with that.
To be fair, this was a regional baseball game of the Atlanta Braves and the Baltimore Orioles, right? I mean, pickleball, listen, that's a nationwide appeal. John McEnroe is a historic figure in tennis. Anyway, and speaking of baseball here, I will say, could the USFL, could we implement a pitch clock here somehow? Because the first half of this game, by God, like I came up, I like took a shower, came up, changed, made a sandwich, sat down to eat. Like we're still in the 2-minute warning here for the first half. Pat, we got to speed up these games a little bit. I know the USFL is working with their clocks, but by God, this first half of this game took about 3 hours.
Yeah. To caveat on some John, first off, Evan loved the no poo. There I was war story with the week 7. And fun fact, John McEnroe actually went on a date with my aunt in 1927 or whenever that was. So, he's a Queens guy, so John McEnroe's got a soft place in my heart. To keep this girlish figure that I have, I do like push-ups during the breaks and whatnot. And, sometimes it's real quick, right? Sometimes it's like, I'm getting a good pump in and whatnot. That's why I was probably in better shape during the XFL season. But this one, like, I tuned out, man. Like towards that last, and then the second half comes and I'm like fully engaged, like got a good pump on going and everything like that. It was weird because I was just like, man, like, obviously there was a time delay, but I was like, dude, what's going on? Like I'm tuning out right now. And then that second half, everything started clicking a little bit. Wes Hills put the team on his back. MBT hit Sage Surratt for a couple nice passes and whatnot, but I mean, I don't know what this time clock situation is going to be. I haven't felt that way during a football game in a while, except that Arlington Orlando game, the 10-9 one, that kind of tuned me out. But that first half was pretty tough to get through. But the second half made up for it, became a lot more engaging and whatnot. And it was good for me on the football side to see DeAndre Johnson, like, actually look like a pocket quarterback. And I love his rushing ability. I think that's great and whatnot. But even on his incompletions, he was sitting in the pocket and he was throwing some of the best footballs I've seen him throw. There were 2 drops that I saw him throw that, like, from the receivers. Randy Satterfield was one of them. And the ball just zipped out of his hand. And I'm so glad. And this is a big thing. And I don't want to poo-poo the CFL right now because, very sensitive group of people. But when everyone talked about this 2-quarterback system with Dakota Prukup, I was like, he's a slower version of DeAndre Johnson. Like, if you're going to do a 2-quarterback system, use Kyle Lauletta. And I don't think Lauletta's got like enough of an upside with his arm to take DeAndre Johnson out of the game. Luis Perez last year, very limited guy, especially in the outside, like throwing to the outside parts of the field and whatnot. But, Perez has a way more experience than Johnson did at that time. Johnson only played in the spring league where him and Ben Holmes, battled for the starting job. I think they were with the Sea Lions, Reed's brother-in-law over there. Grey Cup champion, Ben Holmes. He's watching, by the way. He's weird. But to see Johnson kind of get full reign of this offense and actually implement, his skill set and the development he's taking – Mike Riley is one of the better coaches in this league. I don't want to put him on that high of a pedestal saying he's the best because there are a lot of great coaches in this league. But to see him take that step forward, even if he went the stat line changed to like 5 of 14. When you actually look at the film, he does look a lot better. Big shout out, by the way, to Trey Williams. For whatever reason, this tweet, is getting a lot of impressions, but Trey Williams totaled over 1,000 career rushing yards between the AAF, the XFL, and the USFL. So that's pretty cool because he does also have NFL experience. And then Darius Victor as well, pinballing his way and doing that consistent, like, give me the rock, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards. And then he breaks off a couple rushes of 15 and 30 yards. And it's such a well-balanced attack because look at the numbers. They're all within, Williams had 8 carries. Johnson, I think, had 4 carries. A couple of those were actual, read option plays. And then Victor had 9. The Generals are starting to hit stride. They're going to become a little bit difficult to deal with, especially if Johnson finds consistency and is able to make those plays. They have a great receiving core. Cam Eccles, Alonzo Moore, an alt league veteran coming up on the 1,000 yards career in the alt league and whatnot. And then those tight ends aren't anyone to scoff at as well. Toby Johnson looks a lot better this year than he did last year, and he's creating a decent amount of push up front. So this Generals team's a lot better than I think people give them credit for. I don't think they get over the hump, going to winning the championship because this league to me runs through the Breakers and the Stallions. But overall, they're proving that they could be a playoff team once more, which is great for Mike Riley and his grandson, who's an assistant coach apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. This was tough. This was like the M-Rob game, and I'm a big Michael Robinson fan with the Seahawks. I do think this was like the weakest broadcasting team out there, and talking about McLeod. Oh, you got the extra down. Like, it's got to be easier for him here than the CFL. Just some weird takes that way, but this was good. Like I said, certainly turned up in the second half. Evan, thoughts on McLeod? Anything Generals, Breakers?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a perfect day for MBT, but still got the job done. Still had 279 passing yards. Looked like a veteran. This was a bit of a difficult game for New Orleans, and I'm not going to say it wasn't difficult for New Jersey either, but it was 20-17. It was a really close game, a really good game. Definitely lived up to my expectation. Wes Hills was a bit slower too, but he still had 2 touchdowns. I mean, my God, man, like Wes Hills is he's looking to break some pretty, serious stats. I think at least with touchdowns, if he keeps up this pace, Pat would have a better grasp on that than I do. But in terms of other things, like Sage Surratt has been great. I knew he was going to be good this season. I had a feeling, definitely kept my eye on him, but he has, really exceeded my expectations. He nearly had 100 yards yesterday. And then we haven't really talked anything defense yet on the show, but Vontae Diggs for the Breakers looked great yesterday. I've had my eye on him since last year too. I think he flashed a lot of potential last year. Again, I don't have his numbers from 2022 in front of me, but he was with the Breakers then too. And I look at him now, and he had a phenomenal game yesterday. So that was one. And then from the Generals' perspective, I talked about DeAndre Johnson on the show last week, so I won't get too much into him here. But this was another game where didn't have amazing numbers, at least in the passing game, but as Pat said, there were a couple of passes that were dropped, and I really liked what he was doing with his arm. I think he's come a long way. Like, DeAndre Johnson is a perfect example of why spring football is important for development, especially the quarterback position, because a guy like DeAndre Johnson, came out in 2020, was undrafted, then in 2021, went to the spring league with the Sea Lions, and then last year, obviously, he was in the USFL with the Generals, but Perez was there, and Perez obviously has the upper hand with his experience and his abilities. So this wasn't really an opportunity for him. Now, I think DeAndre Johnson still finished the year with like 700 passing yards or something last season. Like, he had a role. He had a couple touchdowns, and again, they really used that sort of run element, and I think I said it in last week's show too, but I'll repeat it again. Reminds me a lot of what Houston did in the XFL with Brandon Silvers and Cole McDonald. That was what the Generals kind of did last year, where you have, a guy who can just, stand in the pocket like Perez and just, throw downfield. And then you kind of bring in a guy behind that on package plays adding a run element. But now DeAndre has full control over the offense. And I think it's been really cool to just see him kind of find his groove. And then the Generals have a couple of guys too in the receiving department that have come a long way, like a Cam Eccles looper would be a great example of that. And then, just all around, Darius Victor, we've talked about him. plenty of times. I mean, at this point, he's a veteran. I don't know how old he is now, but he's probably up there, 28, 29. He can still run extremely well. And Mike has said it before because he covers the Generals. But Darius is having a great USFL. He's having a really fun time. And that's really important. A guy at his age, finally finding his groove that late after, bouncing around the NFL for a bit and being in the XFL in 2020 with the Guardians. Just happy for guys like him. It's all, again, we can talk about, these games, right, and how they play out and, how sort of the flow of things is and the broadcast people. Again, I'm a Mike Robinson fan too. But what's really important to me, again, in all these leagues, not just the USFL, but just seeing certain players, again, like the DeAndre Johnsons and like the Cam Eccles Loopers and all that. And even like an MBT, even though he's been around for a while, to see him kind of, again, have this revival. And I mean, he's been good for a while, but just to see him, do this on a different stage with a different set of people, it's just all cool. The storylines will never not be cool to me.
It's funny here. Lewis asked a question in the chat. I wonder if the USFL would allow groups of fans to own the franchise. Could you send that Green Bay from that people pooled their money? It would only take a few motivated fans. Fan Control Football, man. Fan Control Football. Get on it. Get on it. You can own one of the guys who used to work for me, Matt. Yeah, he's part owner of the Wild Aces. That's now the should have been Stars or whatever. Pat's rolling his eyes. Andy Murray checking in from far east. The professor approves of the wicked beard energy on the stream. Welcome to the show. We just had a lot of chatter here in the chat about owning a USFL franchise, moving that. Pat, anything else? We've talked so much. We got to get to the last game before we get out of here for an hour. Who knew these haters had so much to say about the USFL?
Well, I actually have to go because I have to go help Ducky dry his walls real quick. But no, I'm here for the long haul. The cool thing that we saw as well is Wes Hills obviously taking like another facet of the impact is him in the receiving game. He had some tough runs and then towards the end kind of broke off a couple more that inflate the stat line a little bit. But, Wes Hills putting over, I think, 140 all-purpose yards between that. So I think that's a great facet of the game. Something about Breakers tight ends, man. You put that Breakers uniform on. And Sage Surratt, he had a couple bad drops. I think he had 3. So that took his game from like a minus 100-yard game to he'd obviously be over 100. Someone who's not – they talk about him a little bit, but I had him as my number 4 or 5 player coming into the USFL in 2023 is Jared Fernandez. And I think he's one of the better linebackers in the league. Pass coverage is okay, but definitely a top tackler in the league as well. And I don't think he gets talked about enough. A little bit of MBT shade, I feel like. And, people don't – I don't know if you knew this, but his wife is also an executive at Disney in Atlanta, and that's why he came back to America to play football. But MBT was an all-star in Canada. Like, this dude was a top 2, top 3 passer there.
Not according to the CFL fans, which is wild to me. I mean, it's wild to me that I still see comments like, oh, he wasn't even that good in the CFL.
Yeah. Here, I have some copium for you, as people would say. I mean, the guy also played in the NFL for like 7 years. Like, yeah, he was a practice squad guy, but like, it's hard. That's not an easy thing to do, to be like, oh, our quarterback's hurt. Yeah, let's bring in the 27-year-old MBT, like, because obviously he's just a scrub. No, when your quarterback gets hurt, that means you're putting in your backup, who's also more prone to get hurt because he's not practicing as much. And now his, these random, they're salty, John. Like, that's 100% true. So, like, give those guys like these Josh Johnsons and whatnot, like, to sign a guy because you're signing him because your quarterback's hurt. You're like, okay, if we have to put another human being in, we have to play this dude. So
I just laughed here in the chat. Sorry, we're still on the owning the USFL franchise, and I think this is my favorite comment exchange ever.
No. Let me die on this hill real quick.
Okay.
I do not want anyone who watches this show to buy a USFL franchise, and the reason being is because, and I'm not trying to poor shame people here, it is expensive to have this. And there's probably some guys who are making $300,000 that follow us or whatever. Bro, if I'm buying the franchise, I'm going to be selling a couple helicopters first off, and I'm paying each one of my guys a minimum of $150K. And I'm saying, you do not go to the NFL. You work for me. This is what you're doing. I do not care because we are going to run circles through this league. I would bring back Herschel Walker. I've seen the guy in person recently. Guy is yoked still. Okay. I'm bringing back people. I don't want anyone in the price range of what the USFL team is, bro. $10 million right now, cash. Like, dude, man, come on. Like, stop. No, let's stop. Do you even run a business?
If Pat's high on Zin right now, we'll get to Evan here. He just said, this is my favorite exchange. He goes, still would like to know the price range with Fox and value these teams at. And then JJKK, who I think is a US XFL fan, says, probably at least negative $4 million. That was my favorite exchange.
$10 million. $10 million.
Last game here, Maulers gonna maul. Stallions come in. Maulers, have not looked great this season. Looked better than they have in the past. Evan, any actual football conversation on this show? Pat's got too many Zin packs in right now.
Yeah, no, I'll keep the football conversation up. I mean, I study sports business, so everything else around the game is important. But no, I mean, I'm happy to talk football. Let's see. I'm pulling up the stats. So, this game was interesting. Again, another one that didn't exactly go the way I thought it would. Thought the Stallions would have taken this one a bit more commandingly. But Pittsburgh, again, Pittsburgh has shown some flashes, and they haven't necessarily won a lot of games yet. They've one win. But, again, Troy Williams looked good. They had, less than 100 rushing yards still, barely. But, what's the guy's name? Troy Williams on the Maulers, or the quarterback. He had a decent day rushing too. And then Garrett Groshek didn't do a lot, but I think he kind of offers a unique element to their run game. And then, I think Pat talked about it earlier. Bailey Gaither and Isaiah Henney for the Maulers, I both really like. Isaiah Henney in particular, because I've seen him work out in person before. I was with him right before he signed with the Maulers, and he showed a lot of flashes at that time. And, I thought, here's a guy that can maybe do something. And he signed late last year with Pittsburgh, I think. And, again, showed a couple things, but nothing serious. And then this year, he's just, he looks really good this year. I mean, he looks like he's found his stride, and him and Bailey Gaither are definitely sort of like a dynamic duo. And Trey Walker, too, didn't even mention him, but he's all right. I think he was there last year as well. And then you want to look at the defense again, because we haven't talked about defense a lot other than me having my bit about Vontae Diggs and how much I liked him with the Breakers. Kiava Tizino, I think his name is. He's been all right this year. Again, led the team in tackles last night. Another Mauler from the Kirby Wilson era in 2022. And then let's see, what else here? I want to talk about the Stallions for a bit. I mean, Pittsburgh, I don't know. They had a good game. They gave the Stallions a run for their money. But at the end of the day, this game, once again, to me, was about Birmingham. And, McGoo had a very slow start, threw 2 interceptions early. Didn't look that great. And then I think it was at the 2-minute warning before the second half. It kind of just seemed like there was a momentum shift, and suddenly the Stallions kind of rode it out for the rest of the game, especially with that Deion Kane return touchdown. That was a fantastic play. I think it was 91 yards or something. Good for Deion Kane. And then the other guy, too, is Davion Davis, who I know personally. Met him because he used to play for the Roughnecks. He was there for, I want to say, 2 games, and really nice guy. Just fantastic. I mean, he's really come a long way just in these couple weeks in the USFL, and I knew when he signed with the Stallions it was a good sign. I figured he was going to have a big role there, and especially now that Marlon Williams is out, he's really starting to get in his groove, and this was a great day for him. I think he had a touchdown earlier in the season, probably I think it was week 1. But quick shout out to Davion, man. I love that guy. And then, on defense with the Stallions, Scooby Wright coming back was a big talking point because obviously he last year, was a key piece to their defense, and I don't think he's played this year. But he came back, yesterday, led the team in tackles, had a tackle for loss, nothing outstanding. Some of these defensive players, they haven't necessarily had like ridiculous stats. Like so far in the USFL, we haven't had like a Trent Harris or anything that comes out with a 4-sack game, and that's totally okay. As Pat said, there's a lot of guys that fly under the radar, like Gerard Fernandez on the Breakers. I'm glad you brought that up earlier, by the way. But yeah, I mean, Scooby Wright coming back was a really good look, and overall, like the game, just going back to the overall sort of flow of things, Birmingham's down a couple guys right now. So like a Bo Scarborough, they don't have. And, obviously Marlon Williams, Jamar Smith, those guys are out for the year. Alex Magoo kind of came back down to earth a bit after he's had a couple really good performances. But they still got the job done. It's one of those things. It was the same with the Breakers, right? Like they had a close game with New Jersey, who, again, I figured the Generals would give the Breakers a run for their money, and they did. But in this case, the Stallions just kind of, veteran, like complete roster, really showed. And again, Dion Kane, I was so happy to see that play because I've been pulling for Dion Kane for a while. And, I want to say that's his second return touchdown of the year, but that one in particular at that time in the game, really helped him out because I think that was after the Troy Williams touchdown. He had a decently long rushing touchdown. And, just great to see. It was all around, a really nice win for Birmingham. And, now at 3-1, they're right behind the Breakers there in the playoff running. And it would be really interesting. I mean, again, fast forward however many weeks, but it would be really interesting to see a Stallions Breakers playoff game. I'm already looking forward to that because I already think it's going to happen. But that's definitely one to have circled on the schedule.
Excuse me, Pat, any thoughts on this? The XFL just tweeted out their all XFL list. We'll talk about that in a minute. Any other thoughts on the game while I tweet this out?
I mean, as far as, and I've been vocal about this with Birmingham, is I think they brought back 65 or 70, almost 70% of their roster came back. So when the chips are down and you are met with adversity, the experience kind of, comes to fruition. And the only thing negative out on the sidelines I really saw was you did see Magoo get a little bit more flustered than what I would like. And maybe that goes to some inexperience, whatever. That's another conversation. But you did, regardless, is he knew he wasn't playing his best football yesterday. And he was still able to lead the team and do what they needed to do. The defense didn't panic. And something they brought up on the broadcast a lot is even though the Maulers are doing a great job running up and down the field, is when they got inside the 10, they could not finish. And that's something that bothers me a little bit because a couple times on first down, they were within, I think, the 5-yard line, and they didn't even try the power, run a power play or anything like that. I'm not saying that Groshek would have got in the end zone or anything, but he's a stocky dude. They had this guy, ironically, his name is Mason Stocky, their fullback. They're throwing the ball a lot to him. He's a big dude. Like, I'd like to see them go under center and just trying to power it in. And, if you don't get on first down and get cute, that's fine. But Birmingham was able to kind of, not the best game they played, not Magoo's best game, through some bad. Like, he missed 2 or 3 touchdowns I saw. And then when they were within they were on the 17, he missed Davion Davis. He missed Jay Sternberger, which Sternberger could have caught that ball. It was a difficult catch, but he did get 2 hands on it. And then there was that interception to Dion Kane where Kane beat his the defensive back. So it was a little frustrating to see Magoo miss those throws. If he could make those throws, he'd probably be in the NFL. But just kind of putting the team on his back and, a collective effort from the rushing attack without Bo Scarborough, as Quandre White, CJ Marable, doing, all collectively, I think they all had within about 40 to 50 yards each. So you put up 140 rushing yards, you're usually going to have a good game. The Maulers, it comes down to experience for me, man. Like, Mauler's going to Mauler. We know who they are. They're 2 wins in 14 games at this point. It's a little bit frustrating, but they are overall as a product way more competitive to watch. Evan touched on it with Davion Davis. This guy's been a major upgrade, especially with Marlon Williams out. I think we all thought Williams would take that next step, and then he, got hurt, especially with the team not having Osiris Mitchell and Victor Bolden this year. But guys are stepping up, and Magoo, like you saw, I said, didn't play his best game, but still got it done with his legs. And You know, that both his touchdowns were awesome. And the awareness he had, by the way, it was kind of ticking down to, you know, make sure he had appropriate ball placement and tap the end zone, not try to dive or anything. All you have to do is tap that pylon to get a touchdown. That says a lot about, you know, his football IQ. And, you know, Magoo's easily a top 3, top 4 quarterback in this league. And you know, you're going to win football games with that. And it's going to come down to the Breakers and Birmingham in the South. But on the flip side, we're seeing a lot more competitiveness from the Maulers. You know, they're not as air quote memeable. So it's, you know, I'm pretty okay with the product. I'd like to see, you know, Pittsburgh punching in the end zone, get a little bit more aggressive. But in the end, if we talked about this last year, that the Stallions, who obviously won the championship, were going to win by 4 points against the Maulers, probably be like, okay, that's a good football game. It was ugly at times, but overall, it was way more engaging than that first half of the Breakers game.
Last thing here, we'll get out of here soon. We're over an hour. I appreciate Pat and Evan's time today. USFL did all that. XFL just tweeted that. We could probably do a whole episode about this. I'm sure we'll talk more about it on the live show coming up this weekend for the kickoff. But the XFL did send out their All-XFL team. XFL's North Division champions led the league in All-XFL team honorees with 7, while all 8 teams had at least one player honor. We have Teamu here for quarterback, Abram Smith, running back, you know, Deontay Burnett, Hakeem Butler over there, Lucky Jackson, Ja'Cory Pearson, Cody Latimer. A lot of good names on here. Evan, again, we could do a whole thing about this, but any initial thoughts on kind of this All-XFL team list is coming out?
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at it right now because I haven't seen it. I see Deontay Burnett made it on there from the Roughnecks, so congratulations. I guess, well, did they say anything about McCarron on there, or are we just assuming that? Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that means there's better things to come, or I don't know. Maybe that just means, you know, they favored Teamu. But either way, good for him, I guess. Geez, you really put me on the spot here, man. I'm just like,
sorry,
no, you're good. I'm just like, I've not seen anything from this yet. I see Deontay Anderson on there too, who's someone I talk to on a pretty regular basis. So shout out to him as well. Peter Tamapenu, yeah, no question there. A lot of these, again, I'm just looking over very. Jack Heflin too. That's a good one. Glad they got him on there from the Roughnecks. Again, I don't know, just like grazing over this. I'll have a deeper look into it later, and I'll probably put some thoughts up on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, Mike already put out his, you know, kind of All-XFL team, and some of this seems to be aligning up with that. So, the bottom line here is, look, if I can't, you know, to stay away from the players for a minute, even though that's what this is about, it's great to see them get some recognition. I mean, I won't go too, you know, deeply into the specific players because like I said, I'm just looking at this for the first time. But the bottom line is, you know, it's good to see the XFL kind of do this, you know, offense, defense, special teams, you know, because the players deserve this. You know, it's not, we've talked about it before, but it's you know, as much as this league is a showcase to get film, and yeah, the kind of all spring football leagues are, you know, guys want to get to the NFL, you know, there was a lot of time and effort and money put into this season, and you know, people really had to buy in if you wanted to win. So this is kind of the fruits of labor, you know, being shown in the form of you know, these awards and honors and whatever. It's really good to see the league doing that and not just saying like, oh, you know, here were a couple good players from our season, you know, in these teams. It's like, well, you know, they've really put some thought into this, as people like Mike have with their All-XFL teams, and really any one of us who's covering a specific team. It's a lot of time and money and effort. So again, just good to see this in general.
Pat, any thoughts on this before we get out of here?
I mean, we could talk about the snub at quarterback. When it came to the throwing of, so this goes into my high horse about who is an MVP, right? And when, you know, everyone kind of throws it to the best player in the league, and I've always been very vocal of, I think Andrew Luck should have been the MVP for his, you know, when he actually played, because at that time the Colts were very bad, offensive line was bad, and he brought the most value to his team of any league. While I do think that Jordan Teamu, and you got to factor in his rushing ability, was very valuable to the team, Abram Smith a lot of times kind of, you know, shield the rock. And Teamu had some pretty terrible passing games for the first 3 games of the year. That all-XFL quarterback, in my opinion, should have came down to DiNucci or McCarron, and then, flip a coin. I'm biased towards McCarron, obviously, with the St. Louis thing. But in the end, I think 90% of people would agree that the quarterback position should have came down to McCarron and DiNucci. Good to see Hakeem Butler on there. I feel like Darius Shepard kind of got a snub at receiver. When you look at his numbers, they were a lot better. And, I think he was top 7 in yards and top 4 in receptions, and his touchdowns, I think he had 6 or 7 touchdowns as well. Burnett obviously had a drop off just like a lot of the Houston receivers, but in the end, nothing too crazy about that. Tight end looks good to me. A little bit surprised with Steven Gonzalez. He was a good, solid player. I think he's going to get an NFL look, but he wasn't one of the staples of the XFL. But he's definitely a solid player, and he definitely deserves recognition. I'm glad he got him. Jared Jones-Smith was suspended for 2 games, but when he played, he ranked pretty high. Honestly, when I watched him, there's only really 1 game where I thought, man, this guy, change it up a little bit. But he ranked PFF wise. I think he was their top player 2 or 3 times. Lavert Hill statistically had a good season, but I feel like Lucas Dennis was a lot better than he was the best defensive back. He rated the highest. Would have liked to see him get that recognition, but ultimately, I don't make that decision. A big snub for me on the Battlehawks was Carson Wells. And while Carson Wells didn't have the sexiest stats, they lined him up inside on the defensive line as an interior defensive lineman. He played the Mike. He played the Will. He played the Sam. He played the edge. He played multiple facets of special teams. So his versatility, to me, the lack of recognition kind of hurts a little bit. I don't think there's much debate with the return specialist. Shepard had almost $1,000 in returning yards. Overall, I think he had almost 1,500 yards. And there were so many games where they were down and, or the offense wasn't moving, and he, puts them on the other side of the 50. I know there's a couple games he had 70-yard returns, but even, the short kickoffs, you getting them to the midfield, even if you're getting a field goal, when you're down 10-0 and they turn that into a 10-3, okay, all of a sudden there's a ball game going on right now. So as far as the Battlehawks, Carson Wells and Lucas Dennis are my big snubs. I mean, I don't feel like bothering people with talking about how great AJ is, because I think everyone knows that. And according to some people, he was the MVP of the XFL, and given by the official XFL, even though it was given by us at XFL News Hub. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people think Von Hutchins is white as well, based off the awards.
Well, that's good today. We got a little XFL talk in there. You didn't have to torture ourselves too much with the whole USFL show. I'm just kidding. Like I said, reminder, we will be live San Antonio Saturday. No Friday show this week. Working on an interview, though, that might be kind of cool. And we'll put it in probably when we get back from San Antonio. Evan, any final thoughts from you today? We'll toss to Pat. I will be posting all the live show information here coming up this week. Anything else from you?
Definitely going to have to take a closer look at those, the All-XFL team. But again, glad we could talk about that. And looking forward to the XFL championship next weekend. I mean, we did this entire show about USFL. And keep in mind, I watched all the USFL games this weekend too, just like Pat. I had a lot of time on my hands just kind of hanging around. So, I was able to do that. That was good. Enjoyed the games, enjoyed talking about them. And, I'm looking forward to, again, we'll have a bit of USFL, XFL crossover next weekend again, because we'll have one XFL game and, the 4 USFL games. But looking forward to it. Again, after that, it'll be, full USFL, and then the CFL will eventually start too for, again, that crowd, people who are interested in that, which might includes myself. So
I'm excited. I saw Cody Fajardo tweeted this morning. He's landed in Montreal. He's tweeting now, bonjour, Montreal. Very excited for that, and watching the travels of Cody Fajardo there in the new land. Pat, anything else from you?
Not much. It's going to be a busy week for me as far as articles, doing a bunch of Battlehawks follow-up from the season. USFL quarterback rankings I'll be doing as well. So check me out for that. Just do a shameless plug. Follow me on Twitter by Pat Rifino and on YouTube, Analyze and Educate. Shout out to Mike Glass, quarterback of the Alouettes, who has just got engaged, and he'll be reporting the camp, former EMU guy. So, Fajardo looks like to be taking the obviously QB1 snaps, but, Mike Glass, St. Louis native, bounced around, IFL guy, should have a good opportunity to make that team as well. So once again, thank you, Reed, for having me on, and, full force. We got 20 weeks of football right now. So, a little bit fatigued, but I'm here for it, because once the NFL shuts off or comes on, I can shut off my brain and just watch the games as a fan.
Yeah, we between the Stanley Cup and the USFL, XFL, everything else, a lot of we're in the sports world right now, and I am glad that we basically pressured Pat last week on the show into changing his Twitter handle. So I'm glad that we were able to because we did that, right? We kind of bullied you into changing that. So I appreciate that. Evan, good luck with your move home from college for the summer. Pat, good luck with everything in your travels. Thank you, everyone. Like I said, like and subscribe. We will see you Saturday in hopefully sunny Birmingham. It looks like there might be some rain, but hopefully sunny, or not Birmingham, San Antonio. Where will I be? San Antonio. We'll see you guys Saturday. Thanks again.